The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Bedford again for episode number 4. Now, this one's going to be quite the fun walk when we eventually get to the walk, because I've got to go up and downhill and do all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. There's even a point where I'm going to be right on the banks of the River Grey Twos, hoping not to fall in. If I do, I'll make sure I get it on camera so you can all have a good laugh. Anyway, we've got to get there first. We're beginning here at the playing field and the village hall, which is a long way out of civilization in this one. Welcome to Pavenham. Pavenham, Papa's homestead. Today on TVI we hit the lovely village of Pavenham, yet another one that sits on the River Grey Twos in the borough of Bedford. This is an attractive village with many stone buildings, delightful riverside walks and lots of osier beds. It's the latter that puts this village on the map. Pavenham was well known for its rushwork, which involved cutting and using the reeds and rushes in the ooze and turning them into things like baskets, table mats and even hats. The osier beds on the ooze these days are still grown and cut regularly, keeping the tradition going. The north of the village is a rather interesting area. You'll find some superb Jacobean carvings at the Church of St Peter, which also has an impressive tower and 5 bells. Pavenham Golf Course has a challenging 18 holes set in an idyllic parkland with many water features. That parkland once belonged to a massive house which had to be demolished after a fire. It was associated with the Alston family and later a man called Sir George Lawson Johnson, better known as Lord Luke. In some circles, he was also known as Baron Bovril. Yes, indeed, I am talking about the beefy drink you might have when it's cold outside. We'll discover Pavenham's links to Bovril in this video, as well as taking in the rest of this awesome little place in the process. There's loads to cover in this one, so sit back and enjoy this tour of Papa's homestead. Here's how Pavenham Parish appeared on the 1900 map. Again, we're in a village that's almost completely encircled by the River Grey Twos, only this time there are no gravel quarries. Here, the riverbank was utilised for its rushes and osiers. Farming was, of course, also a prevalent industry. All around the village there were several fields, and that's not really changed. This is still a village with a very agricultural feel to it. There are no outlying hamlets in this one, so let's concentrate on the main village a little more. Zoomed in now, let's go through some of the landmarks that were here a century and a quarter ago. Straight away your eyes are drawn to the huge parkland in the east. It's fair to say that looks a little different now. At the edge of the parkland here, you can see the words Pavenham Bury. That's referring to a massive house just to the south of the church. It no longer stands because it was demolished in 1961. The church is still there though. Looking to the southernmost areas, you can see a chapel is marked. That's now gone, but there is another chapel that's not marked here. By way of a simple PH for public house, the Cock Inn is marked here, but the one that's shown on this map is not the same building that's here today. Not marked is the school, but you can tell which building it is. It's here, and that's still very much standing. So how does all that translate to the modern village? Well, here's how. Essentially, the main village is still the same insofar as the main road goes. We're still dealing with a linear village, but now the eastern portion of it looks a bit different. That parkland has gone, replaced with a golf course. Here's how we're going to explore this village. To begin with, we'll start at the village hall and the playing fields, which are separated from the rest of Pavenham to the east. We'll then drive into the village and start our walk here on Mill Lane. That's so we can check out the Osier Beds near the Grey Twos. After doing that, we'll head up to the main street, passing the 2 chapels before heading north over some fields to the church. That'll be an uphill slog, so be prepared for that bit. On reaching the church, we'll spend a bit of time there before then exploring this new housing estate to the south of it. In doing so, we'll learn about the village's connection to some notable people, as well as explaining what happened to Pavenham Bury. Church Lane then takes us to the War Memorial before we cut back towards Mill Lane using the rest of the main street, passing the current Cock Inn on the way. So, with lots of footpaths to use here, this one promised to be quite the adventure. Let's see how I got on. To start proceedings in Pavenham then, we're at the village hall located a long way out of the main village to the east. Mind you, it's worth the effort to come and see this one. This isn't just the village hall, it's also the playing field, all rolled into one. The village hall has several uses. One of them is as the base of the Pavenham Women's Institute. That was one of the first to be started in Bedfordshire. It was inaugurated in 1910 and it's been thriving ever since, providing the ladies of the village with an interesting monthly meeting. The history of the village hall is sketchy at best. The current building has been in use since 1980. It replaced a previous hall which had been modernised back in 1959. This shouldn't be confused with the Sports Pavilion, that's a separate building. Speaking of sports, several are played in this area. The story of the cricket club is linked to Felmersham, the village we were in yesterday. In the early 1900s, Felmersham Cricket Club, which was also known as the Toff Team, played on the meadow on the Sharnbrook side of the River Great Ouse. On occasion, they were umpired by Squire Green, who lived at the Grange, hence the name Toff. Now, you'll recall yesterday that we never mentioned the cricket club in that video, and that's because they don't play on that same field anymore. In fact, they don't even play in Felmersham. In 2006, Felmersham joined forces with Pavenham to form the club that use this ground today. This is because Felmersham could no longer field a full side. So what we have today is a merger, Pavenham and Felmersham Cricket Club. As an ECB-affiliated community club, they are open to all. They have 2 adult teams playing in the Bedfordshire Invitation Saturday League. They also have teams at under 10, under 12 and under 14 in the Bedford Youth League. Football-wise, Pavenham FC play in the Bedfordshire County Leagues, and the playing field also has a tennis club over on the far side. Beyond the trees, there's also a golf club. See, I told you this is a very sporty area, now didn't I? There is a path across the course, but it's easier to show you it in pictures. Pavenham Park Golf Club opened in 1994 and has since established itself as the premier golfing location in Bedfordshire. The course and clubhouse were officially opened by Ian Poulter and Justin Rose, and they followed that up by playing an exhibition match. The course has everything you would expect from an undulating parkland layout. It offers a well-crafted golf experience in a naturally secluded environment. Impeccably conditioned, it continues to evolve to meet golfers' needs, whilst also offering new challenges at the same time. With 5 par 5s and 5 par 3s, the course offers an abundance of birdies coupled with some of the toughest short holes in the region. The final challenge is to master and understand the unique USPGA style greens, which have often been compared to the banks and slopes at Augusta. In short, this isn't an easy course to play on. As such, there's a saying that goes with Pavenham Park, which you should take into account before you start wielding your clubs. It simply goes, if you can putt at Pavenham Park, you can putt anywhere. Good luck, golfers. Let's drive into Pavenham now. It's not a lengthy trip, but I still felt it was easier than walking, especially given that between the playing fields and the War Memorial, there isn't much to film on foot. A lot of it is just trees. Pavenham is a very leafy village. My first task was to head down Mill Lane towards the River Great Ouse. Now, as far as a watermill goes in this village, my efforts to pin down anything about one fell woefully short. To be honest though, the mill is kind of not the reason I wanted to come down here. You see, for a long time, Pavenham has been associated with Osier Beds. It's been a while since we talked about them, so here's a recap. An osier bed, or alternatively an osierie, is where historically willows were planted and coppiced to produce withies, which were then used for several purposes. Commonly, withies were used to make baskets or fish traps. Osier beds worked well anywhere where the ground was reedy or marshy, so the fringes of rivers, especially those which often flood or those with small islands, were common locations. Here in Pavenham, both things are true. The Pavenham Osier Beds cover 1.3 hectares of wet, marshy meadowland. It's a designated nature reserve on the banks of the River Great Ouse, managed by the Wildlife Trust for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire. Although commercial basket weaving disappeared in the 20th century, here in Pavenham the osier beds are still planted and cut, and they're supplying material for basket weavers. That's thanks to the work of the Trust, who continue this tradition by planting more osiers every year. The best time to see the osier beds is in the summer, when this attractive riverside setting draws visitors from the public footpath at the end of Mill Lane. Visitors to the site can see the rare meadow rue in full bloom. It's an uncommon flower which likes wet meadows like these. Pavenham historically was associated with the craft of rushwork, which has been practiced here since the mid-17th century. Several shops in the village produced large rolls of matting for covering floors of large buildings, including cathedrals and even the Houses of Parliament. The common bulrush has been harvested in Pavenham for at least 200 years. Rush cutters waded, often chest deep, into the River Great Ouse and cut the rushes using a rush hook. These were then bundled into bolts and stacked together to form rafts or rooks, which could be punted along. So as it turned out, I didn't have to get all the way up to the bank of the Ouse. I thought I was going to have to be like literally treading water to do that, but apparently not. The osier beds come quite a way away from the bank. So I'm not getting wet today. Go me. Right, okay, let's make our way back to Mill Lane, and we'll head up Mill Lane towards the site of a chapel, and we'll see what else Pavenham has got to its name. Now, next to cover, we have the first of the two chapels that used to serve this village. Near the end of Orchard Close is the site of a former Wesleyan chapel, and site is the right word because the chapel is no longer standing. In its place is this house, with the name Chapel Site. I mean, it's not wrong. The chapel was built in 1857 and was demolished in 1963. Very little is known about it, and the same can be said for the Wesleyans in general in this village. There was a primitive Methodist presence in this village too, though. Their old place of worship is still standing. Follow me. In 1842, Pavenham was noted as a primitive Methodist preaching place. 10 years later, John Simons Gosling, an upholsterer from Bedford, registered a building for worship here on the 8th of October. A second registration was made in 1859 by Joseph Houlat, a baker from Pavenham. The resulting chapel was this, which still stands tall on the high street next to The Retreat, which is a holistic therapy centre. Just looking at this building, one would assume the primitive presence in Pavenham was a strong one. It's not exactly a small chapel, this, is it? However, looks can be deceiving. The primitive cause in this village never really prospered, and by 1884 the chapel was already being put up for sale. It did sell after a short time, eventually becoming the garage of The Retreat. Now, though, it's been converted into a private house. Okay, everything since Mill Lane has been slightly uphill. It makes a bit of sense when you think about it, because we're in a river valley here, so there are going to be some hills involved. It does mean there's going to be a downhill section later, but of course getting to the top of the hill is going to prove quite difficult. That's what I'm about to do now. I'm following a footpath now which will take us to the church. This goes cross country, so for a while there will be no civilization. Now then, people, how many times have I crossed a field on a footpath and said, oh, it's great that the farmer has managed to keep the path, you know, visible and open. Well, here that is not the case. This farmer wants a bullet as far as I'm concerned, because you tell me where the footpath is. Yep, that's right, you can't see it. It's been ploughed away, which is very, very poor if you ask me, but there you go. That's exactly how some farmers are. Now then, we are almost off the path anyway. I've managed to follow it thanks to Strava, and the next job is to see the church. Now we're at the church, situated on a site where people have been worshipping God for centuries. This church is dedicated to St. Peter, and it's been here since the 13th century. There was almost certainly a church on this site in Saxon times though, although no documents exist to prove that. The first documentary evidence for a church here comes in the form of a papal letter of 1205. That established that Pavenham's church was not independent, but was instead a parochial chapel attached to Felmersham, and so its clergy were appointed by Lenton Priory in Nottinghamshire. Lenton Priory relinquished Felmersham in 1283 and control later passed to King's Hall, Cambridge, which, as a result of university reorganisation, eventually became Trinity College in 1543. They were then associated with Pavenham until 1859, when it became an independent parish. Why is all of that important then? Well, the link between the church and Trinity College is still remembered in a ceremony that dates back to the time when the college permitted the parish clerk to gather as much grass as he could between sunrise and sunset from one of 3 open fields. In July, 11 days after the Feast of St. Peter, the aisles of the church are strewn with newly mown hay as a token of thanks for the gathering of the first hay harvest. The 11-day delay was a direct result of the adoption of the Gregorian calendar in 1752, when 11 calendar days were lost. So to the church building itself then. This was built by the Davenant family, who were granted one of the 3 manors that existed in Pavenham after the Norman conquest. That manor eventually became known as the Bury. Keep that name in mind for a few moments' time. The building stone is an oolitic limestone which outcrops locally. It may well have been extracted from the quarry that was situated beside the footpath which leads from the top of the village playing field and then around Pavenham Park golf course. Initially, the church was a relatively simple building consisting of a nave and a chancel. The only part of this building which can still be positively identified is the remnant of a more rounded and massive arch which can be seen in the wall of the south porch to the left of the entrance to the church. The de Pavenham family were benefactors of St. Peter's and were probably responsible for building the north chapel and the south transept. The transept may have originally been a side chapel commissioned by Joan de Pavenham to commemorate her husband Lawrence, the last of his line. St Peter's Church exhibits three phases of medieval Gothic architecture: Early English, Decorated and Perpendicular. All three phases are characterised by pointed arches in contrast to the rounded arches of the earlier Romanesque period. On exiting the church, we then find ourselves in a housing estate. Now, this might look like your typical average 20th century development, but this area has a history that simply cannot be ignored. If you're local and over the age of 70, the chances are you will remember what was here. This was the site of the Bury, a massive house which was pulled down in 1961 after standing in a derelict state for a few years prior. It was already semi-derelict in the mid-1950s, but fell into complete ruin before it was eventually demolished. Its garden was overgrown with brambles at the end. It used to be a great area for children. Even though they weren't supposed to, they would explore the ruins. One account I found about the place was written by a man who, as a young boy, discovered a huge steam engine that would have provided power for the Bury's water supply. This new estate now covers the site of the house and its grounds. The whole site used to be covered in huge estate-type trees like elms, limes, oak, and of course the back drive to the Bury itself. It's certainly changed a bit now, but at least the modern street still retains the name. So why did the Bury end up in a derelict state? It's a common tale as far as England's lost country houses go. The house was formerly known as Burystead Manor House, and the alternative form of Pavenham Bury was adopted after the house was extensively remodelled in 1842. That turned it into the square neo-Jacobean 3x3 bay house which you older folk may remember. It was extended by the addition of an extra bay with a matching bay window, which it gained in the early 20th century. However, there was an earlier house at the core. As such, it retained an 18th century staircase, perhaps dating from a short period of ownership by John Franklin. It was left abandoned after being badly damaged by a fire. Some of its fixtures and fittings were reused to fit out the former stables and coach house, which is now known as Pavenham Court. Several people who we have already mentioned this week lived at the Bury. These included several members of the Alston family who were here between 1647 and 1745. Sir George Lawson Johnston, the first Baron Luke, lived at the Bury too, as did his son, the second Baron Luke. Okay, having made it through the Bury, we are now on the road back down towards the main street. And it's downhill! The hills have kind of disappeared now. It should be flat to the end. So that's good for my legs and my feet, quite frankly. So, next to see is the War Memorial, which is on the corner of the road I'm currently walking on. After making our way through the Bury estate, we've marched our way down Church Lane to its junction with Oakley Road. At this intersection we have the War Memorial. It takes the form of a stone cross mounted on a stone plinth. In turn, that stands on two concrete plinths. There are 11 names on this one for those who were lost in World War I, and the other 7 are the World War II casualties. The memorial was built by Messrs S.W. Jarvis & Son, and the architect was George P. Allen. As for the site of this, that was donated by Sir George Lawson Johnston, the first Baron Luke. Next we have Pavenham National School, which used to be run by the Church of England. Of all the schools we've seen this week, I think this one is easily the prettiest. What do you reckon? This was built in 1853 by the Reverend Joseph Tucker, another former resident of the Bury. It has an unusual gable with a bell turret and a clock, and the latter of those remembers the school's founder. The plaque on it reads, "This clock was placed here in affectionate remembrance of Joseph Tucker, AD 1877. The school closed in 1983, and now Pavenham's children have to go elsewhere. Right, opposite the school we have a parish notice board, and you know what that means by now. So let's put a card in. Oh, it's open. I wasn't expecting that. Oh, it's a magnet board as well. I love these magnet boards. There you go. Brilliant. Pavenham in the books. Oh, it's not going to close now for some reason. There we go. They can be awkward at times. Now, our next job is to go down the side of the school, down a footpath you can see there. Now, that footpath runs between the school and these houses on the left-hand side. That one's Wayside Cottage. That one is the old post office. It's still got a post box on the outside. So, down the footpath we go, but we're coming back to this street in a moment. Now we've joined a footpath which runs kind of parallel to the main street. You'd have thought there'd be nothing greatly special about this, but I'd spotted something on the map and I was intrigued. Having found nothing about it, I opted to go and see what it was for myself. Well, what I'd spotted was something called the Adam's Apple. It looked like a community garden of some description, I'm not sure what. But I couldn't see any community garden once I got down here. The only garden I can see is this garden, which is definitely not it, because that belongs to the pub which we're about to go to. So quite what the map was driving at there, I have absolutely no idea. Never mind. Let's have a look at the pub next. Here we have Pavenham's only pub, which is called the Cock. There are many pubs across England with cock in their name, and their origin stories are pretty diverse. Many pubs adopted the name in reference to the heraldic charge that's featured on coats of arms since medieval times. In some instances, pubs took their name from cock ale, a kind of beer popular in the 17th and 18th centuries. That was brewed using a boiled rooster and was thought to have aphrodisiacal properties. Others derived their name from the sport of cockfighting, legal in Britain until the 19th century. Nobody knows which of these led to the name of this particular pub, but whatever the provenance, the Cock at Pavenham was a coaching inn for several hundred years before it was destroyed in a fire and rebuilt in 1937. That rebuilt pub is what you see before you right here. Step inside this one and you'll see a series of black and white photographs on the walls of people from Pavenham. There's a story behind those. They're known as pub traits and they were taken by Pete Ford. The idea was for the black and white images to look like they were taken 100 years ago. In total, 34 images of people were taken, and there's even a couple of dogs in there as well. The aim of the Pub Traits project is kind of like what I'm doing, creating a snapshot in time, but it also shows how pubs and the local community are tied together. As far as the village goes, that's it, but we have a couple of former residents to discuss. The first one is Sir George Lawson Johnston, KBE. Once the occupier of the Bury, he was the first Baron Luke, the great-great-grandfather of the man who currently lives in Odle Castle, which we saw on Tuesday. Lord Luke was a British businessman and peer who played a significant role in the development of Bovril, the popular beef extract that so many of us know and love. Now, I don't like it, but on a cold autumn or winter's evening, it's the favoured hot drink of many a Brit. Bovril is a thick, salty meat extract paste, similar to a yeast extract. It's sold in a distinctive bulbous jar and as cubes and granules. These days, Bovril is owned and distributed by Unilever UK and produced in Burton-on-Trent in Staffordshire. When it's made into a drink, Bovril is sometimes referred to in the UK as beef tea. You dilute it with hot water, or less commonly, milk. It can also be used as a flavouring for soups, broth, stews and porridge, or as a spread, especially on toast, in a similar fashion to Marmite and Vegemite. Born in 1873, Sir George was the son of John Lawson Johnston, the founder of Bovril. He worked in Canada, Australia, Africa and Argentina, where he developed expertise in trade and raw materials. In 1896, he returned to England and joined the board of Bovril Limited, becoming vice chairman in 1900. In Argentina, he oversaw the construction of a new Bovril factory in Santa Elena, and it was there he developed his expertise, gaining a first-hand understanding of beef production and processing. The Santa Elena factory was a major success, helping to make Bovril a global brand. The Santa Elena factory was the first Bovril factory to be built outside the United Kingdom, and the factory's construction led to the influx of British workers into Argentina. A small British community soon developed in the town, largely made up of factory workers, engineers, and managers. As in other places, the British community in Santa Elena declined in the 20th century as the factory closed and Argentina's British population dwindled. The Bovril factory ceased to operate in Santa Elena in June 1973. Nevertheless, the factory continued as a meat packing company. There is no doubt that Lord Luke of Pavenham played an important role in the development of Bovril, and the link between Santa Elena and this village, thanks to him, is a fascinating one. It's a story of economic development, cultural exchange and immigration, and of course, the importance of food. Now, before we end this one, here's a final piece on Salim Charles Wilson. To tell his story, we have to go back to 1880, when 3 envoys from the ruler of Buganda in Africa travelled to England with the missionary Charles Wilson to meet Queen Victoria. They were housed for some time in Pavenham, where Charles's father was vicar. After 6 weeks, they began their long return home. However, a young African Dinka who had travelled with them, named Hattershil Mashakathish, or Salim for short, remained living with the family in the vicarage. Salim's father had been a chief of a Gok Dinka tribe, but in a raid, Salim had been captured and sold into slavery. He had been later released during Romolo Gessi's war against Suleiman Zabaya in 1879 and joined Charles Wilson at Dem Suleiman. Salim therefore attended Pavenham School so that he could learn to read and write. After the death of Charles Wilson in 1881, Salim accompanied his wife in moving to Nottingham, and there he attended Hume-Cliff College. Yes, long-time viewers, that name's familiar, isn't it? Hume-Cliff College was the missionary training institute that was the precursor to Cliff College, which you can find today in the Derbyshire Dales village of Kerbar. Salim continued to live in England and went on to be much in demand as a preacher and a speaker. He authored 2 books, one of which was an autobiography simply titled I Was a Slave. He was baptised in August 1882 and officially given the name Salim Charles Wilson. He later married, and in his final years he owned a general store in Scunthorpe. Put Pavenham in the books, everybody. We have completed number 4, and that means we have 1 left to visit this week. Come back tomorrow when we'll be exploring not just 1 but 2 villages which used to be separated. These days though, they're more like conjoined twins. See you soon. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.